Welcome to Bonehead. We're doing another episode of books. Why are we doing another episode of books?
Because we did fiction, and now we're doing...
I can't even talk. I'm still traumatized by the conversation that happened prior to this.
Which one?
What about your mother?
My mother didn't traumatize you. I heard you had a good time.
Credits. Something.
Blah, 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 blah.
What are we doing this week, Chad?
Doing nonfiction.
Nonfiction. We didn't have intentions of doing a two-part episode about books. We figured we'd just come back to it later. And I don't know how this will come out in the distribution later on, but...
Did you have cruel intentions?
I had a really good time doing the fiction one.
I'm just a man whose intentions are good.
And ignore them. I had a really good time doing the fiction one. And then we all started thinking maybe we'd do a nonfiction one and maybe do more fiction book later, authors, different things like that. So, nonfiction books and authors you should read is this month's episode of Cosmo.
This month?
Did you say Cosmo?
Politan bitches.
Please don't let me be misunderstood.
Neapolitan's a horrible
So
ice
who
cream.
wants to go ahead
Shut
and get
your
started?
Oh, seriously? You like Neapolitan ice cream?
I like variety.
What's wrong with Neapolitan? It's strawberry, chocolate, and vanilla. Everybody gets to pick what they want.
Yeah. No, because you scoop it out and you always get some of the other ones in there.
Yeah, if you're a Philistine, you can't scoop the edges. I'm
Yeah,
sure
can
when
you
you
not cut
crayoned everywhere, it was all over outside of the...
Cut them.
When it's still frozen, you can take a butter knife in there and cut them.
I mean, I don't do that. I'm okay if a little strawberry or a
Who
little chocolate.
cuts it with a butter?
I'm okay if a little chocolate gets in
I
my
am
bowl.
too. I just his OCD. I was trying to help him.
Spumoni.
Mom's a spumoni.
I haven't had spumoni since... When was the last time
Spaghetti
When was
Factory.
the last time we were at the Spaghetti Factory?
1904.
old spaghetti
The
factory.
old Spaghetti Factory.
Back when I had two working knees.
Back when you had two working jobs. Anyway, who wants to go first?
Why don't you go first?
Okay. So,
No one cares, James.
I had a really... I don't know why it drove me crazy all week going, well, I gotta do Hunter. What other authors? What other nonfiction authors? Oh, Joe, you never read nonfiction. And then I started looking at my bookshelf.
Who's the guy that starred in Hunter? Fred what?
Ward.
Lord.
No. No, it's not Fred Ward.
It's Fred
Fred-
Tomlinson.
No.
Is it
Fred Thompson.
Is it Fred Willard?
I was going to do a great Hunter joke.
Fred Dreyer.
Fred Dreyer. Yeah, I didn't know he wrote a lot of books. See, that joke would have been funny if I would have known the actor's name.
No.
Well,
Yes.
No.
Yes, it would.
No.
It was hilarious.
No.
Haley chuckled.
hashtag
Shh.
Haley is behind the camera shaking her head no.
hashtag
For our
Hunter,
listeners
hashtag book.
out
She is
there.
on the floor laughing.
And we will get to
hysterically.
Hunter in a second, but I want to start out with, there are a ton of books, nonfiction books, and they're mainly about filmmaking. And I've read them over the years, and I just picked some of the few. Which one should I start with? Well, let's talk about my hero. Orson Welles was a dick.
And he's Joe's hero.
Yeah, he was.
Shocker.
Orson Welles was a...
Ultron. No,
dick.
not Ultron. Oh, damn.
Yeah, let's go with that. Screw Citizen Kane.
No.
No, was it Ultron?
Star Trek the Motion Picture trailer.
Oh, yeah.
Orson Welles did the narration.
History of the World Part 1.
Also, yeah.
And he will sell no wine before it's time.
I'm getting on my phone.
Same Orson Welles.
He also did those P ads.
Anyway, moving right along.
Yeah, he did.
Orson Welles was a dick. Orson Welles was a privileged human being, and I'd like to do a whole episode to Orson eventually. We might just do that by myself, so I can get through it without having to yell at people. The same way James is
yeah.
gonna
Are
throw
you being
Hunter-
interrupted?
Yeah,
are we
that
not letting
sucks.
you talk?
And
You got a little hang up there?
No, I don't have a hang up. I
Oh,
couldn't
okay.
find a 3M hook that hang me up. So, back to Orson. This is a book that was actually done, it's an interview with him, and it's Peter Bogdanovich. For you all don't know who Peter Bogdanovich is, he's a filmmaker, he's a director. He directed The Last Picture Show, which is a classic. He also directed the sequel to Sir with Love, which is a dog turd. So,
Unicron.
yes, he's the voice of Unicron.
Unicron.
There we go.
Which is just lazy because it's just unicorn with the R transposed.
Quit ruining my childhood.
Anyway.
He had horns.
So Peter Bogdanovich did these series of interviews with him over time. Peter Bogdanovich was known, he's kind of like the Chad, James, and Joe of the 70s. In the late 60s. He hung around.
He wasn't liked by a lot of people.
No, but he was a fanboy. He was a fanboy of cinema, and he would hang around these people. And if you look at a lot of history, it was, I was hanging with Peter Bogdanovich. And he would get to know these older cinema gods, and he became their friends. And he did this series of interviews over quite a few times.
The Judd Apatow of today.
Probably similar. Judd's probably a little more successful.
Well, yeah.
And Judd didn't have his wife have sex with Elvis Presley. Apparently, Elvis called him Dogovich.
Or
no, it was more like Dogovich.
Herm Scarum has some terror pictures.
Back to this book.
Where's my diet pills?
So the story behind this book is when they did it, later on, Orson, they were going to publish it, and they got some money up front, and Peter had to pay his and Orson's back because Orson had went ahead and spent his money and then got a better offer to do another autobiography. So he couldn't do this one. So this was actually not published till years later, posthumously. And it's a fascinating book because...
That means he died and didn't have any say in it.
Yeah.
Posthumously.
And it's fascinating because it's a filmmaker talking to a filmmaker. So they already have the kind of an understanding of the language and understanding of each of the meanings, and it goes through a lot of it. Orson was famous actually because he did all those guest shows. You think about all those things, all the times he was on he was even on Dean Martin roasts.
Mm-hmm.
You think, oh, Orson talks all the time. He did, but he didn't talk about his movies all the time. In fact, he did not care for talking about his. He would talk about anybody's movies, but he didn't want to really talk about his. And there's a great story in here about him sitting around one night, and I think it's Hoda was the lady he was with the last few years of his life.
Smothered in vanilla pudding.
And, no, Peter Bogdanovich, the Magnificent Ambersons comes on the television when they're flipping through, and Peter Bogdanovich walks into the room, and Orson's crying. And I don't think he addresses it with him, but he asks his lover, I can't remember the lady's name, I think it was Hoda. Oh, he's mad because if you know the story behind the Magnificent Ambersons, it was a movie that was done right after Citizen Kane for RKO, and it was a huge. Citizen Kane was not a success whatsoever. It was almost destroyed before it was ever released, and we could do a whole episode on that. But the Magnificent Ambersons was taken from him as he was doing work for FDR for the war, actually. And recut, and they cut the whole last act out of it, and it's not what he intended. So Peter thought that he was crying because of the cut of the movie, and she said no, he's crying because that was the best time. Check it out. This is Orson Welles, one of my favorite nonfiction books.
Well,
go, James, go!
There's nothing funny there, sorry.
No, well, I was going to say, going off of somebody that's...
Washed up and dead at 24.
Going off of somebody that's obsessed with film and kind of doing their biography that way. If you've never read Silver Screen Fiend, Patton Oswalt, and this is actually another book he did, Zombie Spaceship Wasteland, that's nonfiction. He does essays and things like that. But Silver Screen Fiend is all about his obsession with movies and how it literally cost him relationships, caused him to have a lot of problems. He actually, so the story that he tells in this was he got started as a ticket taker in a theater, and he used to make extra money by selling
before
stuff.
He was a comedian, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is somebody who would actually take your ticket.
Yeah, well, but
that's my contribution.
He would sell it and rip it. But he made extra money by
rip it good.
And
put this together.
He sold stuff.
I don't have the puzzle to reach to you, but you know the scene.
So he would make extra money by selling the stubs. In other words, you would rip it. The next person would come along. You'd sell them a ticket going, don't worry, I've already ripped it, and you'd give it to them. Nobody was really watching him, so he would just pocket that money. And it was standard practice back when you did.
How do you know to do that? How do you know to walk up to the guy and make that offer?
No, he didn't save the customer any money.
Oh.
Customer comes up, says buys a ticket. He's also the usher. He goes, go on in. I got you. And he would split with whoever was working the concession stand. So they would be, and then so the next person would be, oh, here's your stub. I got you. Go on in. And they would pay full price too, and they would split the money. And then that. So basically, they would report that they sold half the amount of tickets that they actually sold.
Oh, so he was working with a guy at the box office. Okay.
Yeah.
I was confused.
No, he was the guy at the box office. It was a small theater in Virginia, outside D.C. Anyway.
He just kept saying "rip it," so I just thought of a chain of people farting.
Anyway, it chronicles moving out to L.A. and those great old film houses they have there that showed classic films. And he talks about his first role in Down Periscope.
Oh yes, it was Down Periscope.
And
his role got cut.
He's in it, and it actually details why it got cut. The reason it got cut was he got offered a gig to do something else that he was sure was going to take off. And he says in the parts of the movie that he's in, you'll see they win at the end. He's in the background. And somebody says something like, you need to go check on. He walks out, and the reason he does that, the director, he was so afraid it was going to ruin the director's relationship with him, but he went and he goes, I got this offer, and he goes, yeah, no, we'll write you off, no big deal. You'll do the final scene, we'll do the celebration, and then I'll just send you off. And he goes, that's exactly what happens. And he said, I was so certain that it was going to be, oh, you broke your contract, you did. He goes, no. And nobody ever points out, wait a second. They win, they celebrate, and you're never seeing the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
But he walks...
By the way, Down Periscope, best submarine movie ever.
He is...
Have you seen The Hunt for Red October?
What's that?
I think there's a ton of other ones.
What's the Clark Gable one?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not even going to humor him.
Is nobody going to bring up Das Boot?
You know, I've actually never seen it.
Neither have I.
Really? I've seen it.
That's the only Wolfgang Peterson film I've never seen.
Shocker, James watched a German film.
But Patton, he goes through the
It's a little bit of a shocker, but these are private jokes.
Jason! He goes through the entire thing talking about, and he details his life compared to what movies he's watching. And he still has notebooks where he's like, watch this movie, here's my comments on it from when he actually did this. The other book that he wrote, Zombie Spaceship Wasteland, if you were a geek in high school, this is the nonfiction for you. Because it's kind of a series of essays, but he goes through his own kind of story. And I love the zombie... So basically the Zombie Spaceship Wasteland, he argues that no matter what you were in high school, you wanted to fall into one of those categories. You're either a zombie that was just trying to get through, you wanted out, that was your spaceship, or you just viewed the future as a wasteland and you were nihilistic about it.
What if you were all three?
Yeah.
Well, and that's what he talks about. He goes, and then there's those people that literally kind of code switch between.
Because I wanted out. I was trying just to get through. Well, I'm probably a little less that. But I wanted out so bad.
But both of these, he wrote Silver Screen Fiend, I think, first. I should have looked this up. And it was popular, and they said, can you tell us more remembrances of what it was like to be you and be a geek and be into movies?
Please print us more money dollars.
Yeah. But both of these, if you like film, since you started with Orson Welles, these are littered with allusions to things, but you can also tell he has a legitimate passion. And he talks about, kind of like if you watch our Chris Alexander episode, when he's talking about, and I'm forgetting the director, he's the director that was a disciple of, did he work with Welles? Made the obscure Franco.
Yeah.
He talks about Franco in this, and he said about seeing it at midnight and just thinking, what would have that been like if you had because he says one of the problems is these classic films, you know them. And he said, can you...
What Franco film was classic? There's a lot of porn in there.
Well, he talks about seeing midnight showings and stuff like that. Yeah. And he talks about trying to break into stand-up comedy and working, and then literally cutting his bits short sometimes just so he'd get in the car and make it to a midnight showing. And he said, I was ruining my career because I was obsessed with film. If you like film or if you're a geek, either one of these are worth your time.
Okay. Cool. Chad?
Joe?
Fascinating, Chad. Well, we'll stay with movies for a few more minutes.
Yeah, I just don't read a lot of nonfiction.
You just don't read?
No, I read. I just don't read a lot of nonfiction. I prefer my nonfiction through oratory or visual That's how I absorb it.
All I
have
heard
a
was
hard
you
time-
preferred oral.
Oh, so you're probably more of a visual learner, or an oral learner, moreover than a read-write learner.
When it comes to nonfiction, yeah. Like, I can absorb, if I'm listening to
This turns into an education discussion.
No, I'm just saying, if I can sit down through a doc, I can watch it. I can sit down and watch.
Oh God, let's turn this into an educational conversation. He said he'd leave.
And
I
burning down
watched
his
Ken
Kia.
Burns. Like, for example, I watched all of
It's
Ken
insured
Burns.
full coverage. Burner.
I will give you $50 to cover it.
How much? How long? There's 9 parts to Ken Burns baseball.
I don't know. I didn't watch all that shit. I don't even like baseball.
I watched it in one day. I've listened to every single podcast.
You're also a glutton for punishment.
But nonfiction, I can't read I don't absorb information that well through nonfiction.
Now that
So go on with your boring ass crap.
right. Now that we've established Chad can't read, that's the user listening. So for you Star Trekky people out there, I thought I would bring one of my favorite books about Star Trek. Nicholas Meyer wrote The View from the Bridge.
Whoever took the picture on that cover is stupid.
Hold on, no. That picture is in perfect clarity. Is your vision going again, Chad?
It done went. The View from a Bridge is memoirs of
Why
Star
the hell is
Trek.
Wilford Brimley on the cover of a Star Trek book?
I'll put two things together with this. Nicholas Meyer made the best Star Trek film. This really isn't an argument as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, no.
It's Wrath of Khan.
He also, though, he's a big geek. Obsessed with Sherlock Holmes.
He's a different kind of geek. He's not yeah. H.G. Wells. He did a movie called Time After Time, which you should check out. Which he talks about in here.
7% Solution?
7% Solution
Which is
that him? He did The Great Train Robbery, maybe? Oh my God, my mind
Great
is went
Train
blank.
Robbery
That was Michael
is
Crane.
Crichton.
Michael
Who
Crane
the hell-
directed.
What else did he do?
Great Train Robbery.
Here, I'll make
Oh,
sure.
anyway,
Go about your business.
let me go about my business. So he did.
He did the Notebook.
He wrote.
That's
He
Nicholas
did do.
Sparks.
He did write Summersby.
Oh, you serious?
Yeah,
Wow.
did write Summersby.
Huh.
Just saying, it's not a bad movie. I don't know why I thought of The Notebook.
He wrote the novel that became the film 7% Solution. He actually wrote the novel, because I know it's by him, because I've got the book.
Yeah, he's very geeky. He doesn't like rock and roll. That's the reason there's a scene in Star Trek 4 when Spock reaches over and that Nicholas Meyer wrote that because he didn't care for rock and roll, listens to classical music. He wrote and directed Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. He would then later on, they asked him to come back to
He
the
rode elevators all day long.
They asked him to come back and do the third one, which is The Search for Spock, and he wouldn't do it because he said we just killed off Spock. That was the whole point. And then he was fine once they brought him back. He was like, I can do more after that. I just refused to do the story, which actually made logical sense to me. So he wrote him and who was the producer on all those? Yeah, he wrote 50% of the Voyage Home, which is
Harv Bennett, wasn't it?
Harv Bennett. It's Harv Bennett. He wrote 50% of that with Harv Bennett. And then he went on to do probably another one of the great Star Trek films. He wrote and directed, or he directed The Undiscovered Country, which is it's a sleuth. It's a Sherlock Holmes mystery in itself. So, The View from the Bridge now is partially about Star Trek, partially about his career, partially about, he has a great story in here about talking about a dick Gene Hackman was. Working with Gene Hackman and several different things. You should try it. I also wrote and directed The Volunteers.
Oh.
Yeah.
Speaking of Orson Welles, he also wrote The Night That Panicked America, which is a retelling of War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds. But before, I'm going to do two quick ones, though. The other one is one of my favorite filmmakers, Sidney Lumet. And he wrote this book called Making Movies. Now, Sidney Lumet directed 12 Angry Men. He directed Dog Day Afternoon. He directed...
The Verdict.
I
I just had to do it to you. I'm sorry. I had to. I couldn't help myself.
We had a long conversation about The Verdict the other day. We're the only two people in America who had a long conversation the other day about The Verdict.
Even the people that worked on The Verdict didn't have a long conversation.
Well, Paul Newman's dead. And so is Sidney Lumet. But anyway, it's Dog Day Afternoon, Serpico, and one of my favorite films of all time, Network. Okay? Sidney Lumet served in World War II, fought for his country, and he actually, it's very much this is how I made movies in the sense of he actually will take you through his day. He explains as he got older how he would do a 30-minute nap at lunch and how he learned in World War II how to fall asleep right on command when he could get it. It's something he kept with him his entire life. if you get a chance and you're really into movies and you're probably 23 or 22 years old and you're like, I want to make movies, and you don't know jack shit, read Sidney Lumet's book, and before you do that or while you're doing that, check out some of his movies too. 12 Angry Men Network. I'm not going to do Find Me Guilty. We'll talk about that later.
Oh, so good.
It is so good. Sidney Lumet's a genius. James, I just wanted to do 2 quick.
Well, no, I'm going to go a little bit old school. So,
The Bible?
no, we're doing nonfiction. We just lost subscribers. I just cost us subscribers.
We're just the atheists.
I
Right?
kid.
Didn't I put a good book in front of that?
You did. And by the way, this is a good book. So these are the autobiographies.
There's
of
only
Mark
one
Twain.
good book. You only need one pill.
The
The gospel.
I kid. Anyway, so this is the autobiography of Mark Twain. This is volume 2.
Should not be that thick.
Volume 1 is just as thick. Volume 3 is just as thick. Volume 2.
He was born, he was on a boat, grew a beard, wrote some books, died.
Lost a bunch of money.
Hung out with Tesla.
Made a lot of more money.
Yeah.
Lost more money.
Lost his family. His wife and his daughter died.
Still had that beard, mustache.
You know, that's Ken Burns, right?
What?
The documentary about him.
Did he do a Mark Twain documentary?
Everybody should do a Mark Twain because
It's
Mark Twain's insane. And what I was going to say about this, so if you look at an
Heck of a
autobiography,
mustache.
if you look at the autobiography of Mark Twain, if it came out before about 4 years ago, it's not complete.
Best portrayal of Mark Twain. Vanilla Ice.
I'm going to punch you.
what? In what?
Ridiculous 6.
Al
Adam Sandler.
Holbrook. Hal Holbrook made a career doing Mark Twain. He did other
That
stuff.
literally happened.
Yeah.
In an Adam Sandler movie, Vanilla Ice played Mark Twain.
Of course he did.
And he talked like Vanilla Ice.
Of course he did. To reference our last episode, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when you have an infinity drive, any BFE thing can happen.
All right. Y'all done now?
Yeah.
I'm just pissed that happened in history. Why do I have to live in that reality?
Mark Twain, when he was writing his autobiography, he got
Stupid
paid.
multiverse.
He got paid multiple times to write it. At one point, one of my favorite quotes about it is, at one point he was approached by, I believe it was Harper's Magazine, to write autobiography, and they wanted to do it, snippets of it.
Yeah.
And he met with them, and he had his final quote is, "Sir, I don't think that's going to happen, for you see, readers are the ones that edit magazines." And he was afraid that not enough people would be interested, and it'd never finish. So he started and quit his autobiography about 15,000 times. And if you buy these books, they are crazily detailed, because the deal he finally made was that nobody could publish his complete autobiography till he had been dead 100 years. Because he literally wanted to do a tell-all, and he did not want to damage anybody's reputation.
What about all that horse shit he said about Aunt Sue?
He did. Well, here's what you have to think. When we were talking about fiction, one of the
Dear
things...
Martha, I got a cracker stuck in my mustache this morning.
When you said cracker, I thought of a white person.
Oh my God!
Why won't this cracker get out of my mustache? Oh, you saltine. Get out of my mustache, cracker.
What was his name? Greeley? What was the
Horace Greeley?
Horace Greeley, yes. He talks about he talks about meeting him one time and about how they hated each other. Or he said, "I did not know the gentleman," and he looked at me and he goes, "What do you need?" And he was supposed to be meeting somebody for dinner. And he said, "I'm looking for a gentleman," and Horace Greeley just yelled at him, "We don't have those here." There you go. But
why did I know who Horace Greeley was?
So there are 3 volumes, and yes, it is very, very dense. Parts of it are extremely funny, parts of it are extremely tragic.
I fell in the outhouse this morning.
And there was a cracker underneath it. I was like, cracker, what are you doing down here?
He
And
talks,
there I found my puppy Jonas.
Next to a cracker.
It turned out it was a big turd.
Roger Ebert said that this
He don't
was
say nothing.
Well, he said before he died that
He said
He didn't say anything before he died either. Well, just keep going.
Roger Ebert wrote shortly before he died that you couldn't put these things down once you got into the tone of them. The problem with it is it's not linear. He talks about whatever he wants to talk about when he wants to talk about it. But the reason I wanted to talk about Mark Twain, the autobiography is...
he carried Ace Ventura.
That, in all honesty, when we were talking about fiction, I didn't talk about it a lot, but the classics that I like are Poe and Twain, and oddly enough, a lot of Southern writers.
I thought he was going to say Southern Rockers.
Hawthorne and all those can suck it. Melville, screw him.
You were saying about your Marshall Tucker pad.
The flip side of this is, you did make a comment about all the horrible things he said about Aunt Sue or whoever. If you even read the edited version, he hated most other authors. He hated Poe. He hated Jane Austen.
Why did he hate Poe?
Because he was a hack.
Nobody likes Jane Austen, but why did he hate Poe? I mean, nobody.
He thought Poe.
12-year-old ladies like Jane Austen. Why does there? What did Poe did to him?
He thought that Poe
deserved being a highlight magazine.
He thought that Poe just embellished too much and took 1,000 words to say what could be said in 5.
Yeah,
how many pages is that?
How many volumes? No, there's
3 volumes.
Hold on.
For the complete unedited.
Can you tell me how much Margaret Mitchell wrote there?
Let's see the references.
Oh no, you did it!
There's about 700 pages a piece, so it's about 3 volumes. Now there are illustrations.
No Margaret Mitchell.
James, have you read all 3 volumes?
I don't have the 3rd volume yet. I haven't picked it up yet.
It's heavy.
Oh, sinner.
Heavy. He can't physically pick it up.
But I do love Mark Twain, and if you know anything about Mark Twain had a complicated relationship with everything. He grew up relatively well-to-do, so his family did have slaves, but he was also against it, but he also benefited from it. You can do an entire analysis of his views on religion. He never mentions, or at least in Volume 1, he never actually uses the term God. He refers to Providence with a capital P. And he does a lot of analysis of what he thought about when he was a kid.
I do too. Every time I go to Rhode Island.
Didn't he have to travel to the West because somebody was going to kill him based on something he wrote? Am I making that up?
He basically went west during the Civil War.
I thought he wrote something about somebody.
And he went to South America. And it's funny, in Volume 1, he talks about going to South America. And he literally says the way they went up, he had went out to California.
Yeah.
Around the time of the Civil War. And there was a newspaper out there that was doing relatively well. And he said, I met with the gentleman that ran it, and he names him. And he said, I vaguely remember going, and they said, what would you like to write about, dear boy? And he said, I've heard that there's some islands near South America that are particularly interesting. And he said they picked one other guy and sent him to Cuba, and he got killed by the Spanish. They picked me and sent me to a tropical island, and I had to send back letters about what was going on. So it was like, we were rock coconuts today.
Dear Martha, I got bit by a mosquito the size of a Cadillac.
I got all the way down
Trust
here
me,
and found
Martha,
another cracker in my mustache.
And trust me, Martha, that analogy will make sense 100 years from now.
But anyway.
No, I don't think so.
Mark Twain, what's also great about it is if you want to see somebody that lived through the Civil War, lived through the invention of the publishing, as we know it today.
If you want to see him, you're going to have to go back in time.
He talks a lot.
What's Ridiculous 6?
Where he lost a lot of money.
Oh, gosh!
Where he lost a lot of money.
That's how Houdini died, you know.
Yeah, well, he ain't Houdini.
Oh, yeah?
He lost a lot of money on printing technology.
Yeah, he lost a lot of money on a lot of different things.
But
he's a terrible investor.
In the first book, in Volume 1, he'll talk about in detail that basically somebody sold him on this typeset idea, and it worked. The only problem is it couldn't be mass produced, and he had invested tons. I mean, literally, that was when he lost his first fortune. But Twain is
he got those royalties from Ridiculous 6. He's fine.
But Mark, real quick, can I add? And this is that Mark Twain made most of his money speaking.
Yes.
Later in life. Yeah. That's where he made his fortune.
There is another book.
His fortune later.
If you look at this and you don't want to hear Twain talk about Twain, there's another book.
Because he made what? 3 or 4 fortunes that he lost, correct?
Yes. Twain wrote another book. Or not Twain. They wrote another book about Twain that came out recently. And if you just search Mark Twain stand-up, there is a book that argues that he was the first touring stand-up comedian. And if you look at... because he went to England and did it. He traveled the world doing it. And the subject of that is that was how he finally ended up, you're right, saving his career. Because he kept losing money. And the other thing about it is, as we've talked about before when we talked about Poe and some other stuff, and Dickens and all that for the Christmas special, there was no international copyright law. You had local, but you didn't have international. So you literally could take a book in America, and I could take this to England and just say, no, I wrote this, or I want this published, and they would pay me and not the author.
Yeah. So. Dickens did the same thing. That's how he came to America to make money.
Yeah.
He came here to the speaking tours. Which is...
And they used to be, you have to kind of understand that they were the rock stars of their time.
They really were,
too.
yeah. When people were literate, which makes some sense because most of the country was illiterate.
One of the greatest stories, well, that's why they went to reading stuff. And one of the stories that he does tell in Volume 1 that actually is kind of funny was he said he went with another author and they were doing this big thing and it was packed. And he couldn't, they had arrived, the train was late. So they ran there, and when they got there, the guy that was taking money at the door said, you need to go in. And he said, there was a crowd, so I was trying to be polite. I leaned in and I said, pardon me, sir, but we're the speakers. And he said, the gentleman then reared back and screamed for all the crowd to hear, I've already let in 4 speakers. The next one's going to pay. Because you didn't know what these people looked like. So he said, finally, just to calm him down, I paid my entrance to my own lecture. So there's a lot of funny story. There is a lot of sad stuff. He talks a lot about his family and stuff like that.
It's pretty good looking.
Mark Twain, right?
Mark Twain.
Yeah.
The tattoos kind of throw it off.
Yeah. I'm showing Joe a picture of...
if you're listening to us on the iTunes or the SoundCloud, Chad has gotten a new tattoo.
The Hal Holbrook...
It's a red dragon one.
And he's retired now, and so if you wanted to see it, you missed it. But
Mark Twain, telling you. Best portrayal.
Hal Holbrook did Mark Twain Tonight for years, and did very much what you'll read in these books, too, his performance.
Yeah,
Vanilla Twain, baby.
Okay, moving right along.
I hope Pauly Shore plays FDR in every movie from now until the
I don't care. I love Theodore Roosevelt, man. Ha!
Well, that's all right, because Fran Drescher's going to play him.
I can deal with that. She was great, man.
I'm going to take this hill.
She was a great mannequin.
All right, so Fran Drescher's mannequin?
Yeah, she was his girlfriend.
UHF. Her best role is UHF.
That's probably true.
Count it.
So, we're going to jump from movies, even though this is obviously the movie version, trying to scrounge up another buck after Fear and Loathing was made into a film. We're going to talk about Hunter S. Thompson. Now, I talked about several different books here. James reads a lot of nonfiction authors. I've probably read a lot of nonfiction books, but not specifically any authors, except for this guy. Hunter S. Thompson was a journalist who was from Louisville, Kentucky. Why did he leave Louisville, Kentucky?
Because he wanted to have a career.
There's a sex thing, too, going on. That he was...
Isn't there a big quote that he said, how do you get famous? Get the F out of Kentucky.
He does, but he almost went to jail for... I don't know all the details, but it's pretty sure she's either... I should have looked it up beforehand.
Okay.
But yes, there's a crime he's also trying to escape as well when he's leaving Kentucky.
That's nothing shocking about Hunter S. Thompson.
No, if you know Hunter. So... Hunter S. Thompson coined the term gonzo journalism. Hunter S. Thompson wrote for many different periodicals, the most famous probably being the Rolling Stone, who put up with him for the most part. And he wrote several different books, one of which, his most famous, is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. If you're watching this, if you've never read the book and only seen the Johnny Depp movie, it's probably 3/4 to 80% good adaptation. Yeah. What do you all think?
I'd say
have you guys ever read Fear and Loathing?
I have read Fear and Loathing.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it's
the thing, and I don't like. I know it seems like we did this a little bit last episode, but I do want to talk about the movie because Hunter was still alive. Hunter's in the movie. Hunter's in the movie.
Yes.
So.
And Johnny Depp lived with him.
Johnny Depp lived in his basement until he lived in Wood Creek, Colorado.
Yep.
And Owl Creek, Colorado, till the day he died. And till the day he died, as far as I know, from every documentary, everything I've read, he still referred to that room in the basement as Johnny's room.
And he called Johnny Depp the Colonel or something like that?
I think they called each other the Colonel.
Yeah.
Johnny Depp, So, this quick story about Hunter S. Thompson. He wanted when he died, he owned all these acreages out in Colorado, somewhere outside of Aspen. And when he died, he wanted a huge, big hand with 2 thumbs and a middle finger, right?
Yeah.
And it was going to blow. I'm sorry, I'm not flipping off the audience. If you can't see me, you're listening on iTunes. Hand, 2 thumbs, 1 thumb on each side, middle finger, and it was going to blow, and his ashes would be spread all across. If you know anything about Johnny Depp and his money troubles, Johnny Depp paid for that after he was dead. Johnny's the one that paid for that. And they actually did it, and you could go online and watch the footage of Hunter being blown all across his acreage.
Yeah.
Right? That's just really quick to show you what kind of relationship they had. They lived together. They were friends for years. Later on, the one book that he wrote that was fiction, The Rum Diaries, was made into a movie that no one saw, starring
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp.
The other person who played Hunter S. Thompson that many people, if you've ever seen the Johnny Depp version, would be
Bill Murray.
Bill Murray, Where the Buffalo Roam.
Where the Buffalo Roam.
With the
Peter Boyle.
character that Benicio del Toro plays. Is played
Dr. Gonzo.
Played by Peter Boyle.
Yeah, Dr. Gonzo.
One of God's own prototypes.
Never meant for mass production. So he's a poet. And he's a journalist, but he was one of the first people to look at, or probably one of the first modern journalists to look at not really trying to get rid of their point of view. So if Chad and I both went to broadcasting school, or degrees are in communication, that's kind of the first thing you hear. You don't put your point of view. You've got to, you're looking for journalism. You're looking for the truth, right? Well, he said, screw it. My point of view is there, and I'm going to express my point of view. And there's several people who have taken that from that point on. I can't remember the famous.
Of course, modern journlism.
Well, yeah, but
there's actually
there's some good. Well, let's not go all Trump on the show.
Well, but I was about to say, but he did create a new form of journalism that hadn't really been.
No,
nobody
and he
had
lived
messed
it.
around with it since really maybe Capote.
Probably
Truman Capote
in the
was
sense of living it.
Yeah,
because
Truman Capote
invented
was,
the true crime novel.
Yeah,
Yes.
Don't you think?
And, as I say,
no
and,
question.
And he was, and that, I mean, there's people and there's movies made about Capote's flavor and his views on that story. I mean, In Cold Blood, as dark as the day is, but
he developed a relationship with those men.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And
whether it was
probably,
anything,
but probably the only. Hunter S. Thompson's probably the only one that just said, yeah, it happened and I'm going to run with it. And that's a new form of...
So, if you get a chance, read Fear and Loathing. If you're into politics, I don't have a copy of it here. Well, first, I'll talk, since I do have Hell's Angels for our people watching. Hell's Angels, he lived with the Hell's Angels for over a year and rode with them. And towards the end of the book, they beat the shit out of him.
Right.
Bad. Right? Bad.
Yep.
Hunter pissed off a lot of people. Hunter was not an easy human being to get along with. Hunter was an expert marksman and was crazy with guns. He would do such games as John Cusack, the actor. Different famous people would show up and hang out with him for a while. John Cusack talked about the first time he met him he said, well, what are we going to do? He goes, well, do you like golf? Yeah. Do you like shoot? Yeah. I mean, they'd shoot golf and shoot him down drunk.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I'd say one of my favorite Hunter S. Thompson stories that I heard before he died was he became a cultural figure in and of himself as much as he wrote about other ones. And
he hated it and he loved it.
And there was somebody had scheduled an interview, had got permission, had met him at his place. Mm-hmm. And he said, I forget, it was a relatively well-known journalist. And he got there and Hunter S. Thompson... cigarette, all that stuff. Met him more or less on the porch or whatever, on the deck, and said, yeah, I want to do that, but yard sure does need mowed.
It was more of an atrium.
And sure enough, another journalist was scheduled to interview him later, pulls up, and there's this famous journalist mowing this area of the yard. And he gets out and he goes, why is he doing that? And he goes, I told him he had to do that. Come on, let's get this over with. And did the interview with the other guy mowing still.
That's Hunter.
Yeah.
His wife, his second wife, the one that he left, that he died, made a widow when he committed suicide, said he was a Southern gentleman, but when he was straight and when he wasn't pissed, and if he didn't consider somebody rude, that he was a Southern gentleman. there's a documentary these two ladies made in the 90s, and I can't remember the name of it, and they spent 2 weeks with him. Not all their documentaries about that. It's really talking about America, and they had to spend 2 weeks because... And you got to remember, at the time, specifically in the last 30 years, if you were famous, you wanted to party with... Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah.
Because everybody partied with Hunter S. Thompson.
And it's a story.
It's a story.
Got a story.
It's very similar to probably Harlan Ellison in that you have a story, because when James and I met Harlan Ellison that weekend when we left, James was giddy, and actually I was happy too.
Yeah.
We had a couple of good stories that we're going to take with us to our graves. Yeah, I never got to meet Hunter. He's truly someone I admire quite a bit, whom I'm sure I would have hated if I'd known.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's that sound?
Yeah.
If you like this, I really need to really highly recommend, if you're into politics, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. He followed around Nixon, McGovern, Muskie through the whole primary at that time. You got to remember where the country was in the middle of Vietnam. Nixon was escalating Vietnam when he said he was going to get us out 4 years earlier. He was going out through Cambodia. He was bombing Cambodia, which is a whole other thing. Look up your history books, by the way. People were mad, but Nixon was still very popular.
Yeah.
Very popular. And he hated Nixon. Hated Nixon. Hated Nixon. Also didn't care for Bill Clinton, by the way. FYI. Actually, I don't know that he's been a huge fan of any president in the last 30 years.
He really liked Jimmy Carter.
I don't know what he felt about Jimmy Carter. That's a good one. But anyway, George McGovern, he was a huge fan of George McGovern, and George McGovern got his ass kicked that election. And George McGovern was probably one of the more progressive candidates that we've had in the last 50 years, probably him and Bernie Sanders. And George McGovern and he were pals, and Hunter admired him, and McGovern said about the book, it is the most accurate representation of the campaign trail he's ever read.
Yeah.
So please, if you get a chance, you're into politics, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. I don't have it up here. I have a smaller version.
James.
I'm going to end with Ellison, so I'm going to go ahead and do...
I knew it.
I love being the moderator. Joe. James.
I'm going to do...
James. Joe.
Klosterman.
Butter. Toast.
So Chuck Klosterman...
I have some, pork jelly that's really good.
Pork jelly?
Port. Made with port wine.
Okay, pork jelly. Ugh.
Chuck Klosterman is more or less an essayist. And I love his books because they're essays and they jump all over the place. I wear the black hat.
I thought he was going to talk about Hunter.
No, that's what I'm going to end on.
Where we at?
Okay, well, I've got to get Chuck Klosterman out here.
Go, James, go!
By the way, Haley just gave him an evil look
in my ear.
Will you stop stuttering and go?
It's not. He does dramatic pauses.
Chuck Klosterman writes essays where he uses historical information, but also pop culture information. My favorite one is I Wear the Black Hat, which examines villainy. In this book, it talks about how if you want to look at real villainy as far as pop culture, Seinfeld, they're evil people. They're absolutely villains.
Yeah.
But also, he does some real historical analysis about how our language changed. He talks about when he wrote the book and told his friends he was going to write a book on villainy, they said, well, you've got to talk about Hitler. And he said, well, I don't want to talk about Hitler. And he says, you've got to talk about Hitler. And then he changed his mind. He went back to those same friends. Okay, I'm going to have to write about Hitler. You can't write about Hitler. Because he also does things with kind of a comic twist. And one of the things that he points out that I think is really interesting, which is just a sign of what his essays kind of look like, is Hitler changed the face of evil. If you read fiction, nonfiction, all of that stuff, when you used to decry somebody as being the ultimate evil, they were the devil. Now it's you're worse than Hitler. And he argues that we are now in a thing where our language has changed because of history and because of news media. So he does a big analysis of all the stuff. His stuff's really well researched. He's written for all sorts of magazines. He's got another book called Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, where he looks at addictions and all of that stuff.
Cocoa Puffs are overrated.
But he's written for GQ, he's written for Esquire, he's written for Spin, Washington Post, ESPN. He is not Hunter S. Thompson, who also wrote a lot for ESPN near the end.
He wrote for everyone.
Yeah.
It's just he is forever entwined with Rolling Stone.
But Klosterman is not as dynamic a personality, but his insights and his ability to say, let's look at something that happened in 1842, and I'm going to tell you how it's going to affect how you eat breakfast in the morning. He does that so well, and it's entertaining. It's at times really funny. The Seinfeld one I've photocopied for people. Sorry, Chuck, I'll send you a quarter. But he has a ton of these books. I've got one in the trunk of my car that actually I got signed, and I left it in the trunk. But his books are...
Get the children out of the trunk.
They cover all sorts of topics, but if you want one to start with, I do recommend I Wear the Black Hat.
They're still in the trunk.
Midgets and onesies don't count as children.
If you...
what the hell do I got?
If you it takes a little bit to get used to his style, but once you do, he is insightful and alternatingly hilarious. I still say start with Patton Oswalt, but he's a close second because he just pulls data.
That's fascinating. Why didn't I name my son Horace? Where did Horace go?
How about Beauregard?
It's too many syllables.
Beauregard, that was a good... Ghost Fever, baby.
Horace.
I don't...
It's too Greek, right?
No, Egyptian.
I'm not racist, so that's not a problem for me. It is you, James.
Horace.
All right, there's 2 books here I've got left.
No, but go ahead.
We're going to go quick
Horace
because
Grant.
I know he wants 20 minutes to spend on
Best
Harlan.
Chicago Bull ever, Horace Grant.
If you're a friend of mine and you see me, if you're a friend of mine and you're interested, ask me. And if you see me at cons and you want to talk about Sam Fuller, that's great. Because Sam Fuller, I believe, is one of those directors that's forgotten in history. And he wrote a book called The Fourth Face. Yeah, Third Face.
He was always hungry, though.
Third Face. He actually wrote and directed The Big Red One. It's based on his real life. Mark Hamill played him. So, anyway, check that out. I want to end on John Cleese. Because the one thing, well, there's only about a half a dozen things that all 3 of us have in common. And one of them is Python.
Anaconda.
Don't want none, hun. This is...
You got bun, hun.
Several of them have written books. I tried.
And Eric Idle just announced his, by the way. Always look on the bright side. Will come out.
I hope it's better than his other book because I couldn't finish it.
Well, I'm just
letting you know. So I'm not actually going to recommend all the Python books.
Now we can't retweet this and tag Eric Idle. Thank you for that, Joe.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, well.
He's like he's gonna watch it.
Like he's gonna lentil.
Like he's gonna lentil watch it. So anyway, this is only delves right through the 80s. He's actually going to write a second one. So if you're interested in Python and one of the remaining, check it out. James,
I'm gonna get into Ellison.
What? You're gonna bring up some?
No, I'm talking about this for 3 seconds. Joe Walton is somebody that writes tons of books.
No shit.
All 3 of us did it.
Writes tons of science fiction books and is a well-known author in her own right. But she wrote a book called What Makes This Book So Great. And if I mentioned Ursula K. Le Guin and all of the people, Octavia Butler, she also is who normally gets called. She has worked with Neil Gaiman. She's worked with all these people. This book, though, examines classic science fiction and talks about why it's timeless. So if you want to know why books have survived...
We can do another episode eventually later,
right.
so you don't feel like you've been cheated.
No. So, I am going to talk about Harlan Ellison.
Good night, everybody!
That's all we got room for. That's all we got room for. We'll see you next. You come back tomorrow night. The famous letter. You come back tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Carson did the same thing.
Harlan Ellison did write a lot of fiction. Does write a lot of fiction.
Badly.
Going to beat
I don't know. That's an interesting idea. I don't know that it made a good movie.
No, but so he worked with Asimov and adapted Asimov and made an iRobot, which is not the Will Smith version. He wrote tons of like I said, tons of fiction.
That's another one. They get about 20-30% right.
I've got some of his books.
Twain,
I had some of his books on the table, but Harlan Ellison, much like Hunter S. Thompson, is probably borderline brilliant. He's definitely brilliant, but also insane. Okay. He did ride, whereas Hunter S. Thompson hung out with Hell's Angels. Ellison, who is, maybe a 5'4" Jewish man?
He might be 5'4".
He
Maybe
joined
5'5".
a street gang in the 1950s a Hispanic street gang to do research for a
West
book.
Side Story?
Which he wrote a fictional version of it called Web of the City. But he also wrote some nonfiction. He wrote this book, which is my dream, is to watch every book or watch the movies he talks about in here. He did a series of reviews which were published on filmmaking. And what makes these different than just sitting down reading old Roger Ebert reviews is he literally starts tearing apart the entire concept. So his review of Star Wars, his review of Empire Strikes Back, his review of... he had a real hatred of The Omen.
Ray Bradbury said it ended poorly. Have you ever read because Ray Bradbury went and wrote his own ending to it, of how he thinks it should have been? If you get a chance, it's just quite brilliant, actually.
Harlan Ellison...
It's very grandiose.
And on the back of this, you can see him hanging out with
Sam Neill?
Leonard Maltin and that one actor fellow.
Basically, it's something that they take the baby to the church and does God have to forgive Satan. It's really good.
Harlan Ellison also, though, wrote a series of conversations about television.
Yeah. The Glass Teat.
And the other Glass Teat was a
I've
follow-up.
read, there are only 2 volumes. I've read both volumes of those, and they're fascinating. They're great. And they're very much of their time, not in the sense of Harlan's not a great writer, just simply because of what was on in the late 60s, early 70s when the books were coming out.
Yes.
So, some of those shows...
A lot of Brady Bunch?
No, but a lot of Saturday morning cartoons. He loved Saturday morning cartoons. Harlan also, was famous for nailing a lot of the starlets.
Yes. If you watch...
You know that? You should watch Dreams with Sharp Teeth and have Robin Williams talking about how he had more kitty. He got more...
yes, he uses the phrase, he got more kitty than...
litter box.
Yeah. Huh. There is a famous photo of him where it's literally him and his typewriter writing, and there are literally women laying on his bed in the background. He got up because he had a story idea.
Yeah, he'd get up
and somebody took a photo of it
at 7 a.m. to watch Saturday morning cartoons. So I'm trying to, and I don't know if Sharon Tate slept with him, but I just throw Sharon Tate out there, laying in his bed, go, hold on, let's watch some cartoons.
But Harlan Ellison has written histories of comic books. So he has done a lot of fiction. He's done a lot of nonfiction. The Essential Ellison, which is his essential works, quote unquote, is over 1,500 pages. He is still alive. He is still, on occasion, writing.
Does he do any more public appearances?
No, he actually has quit signing completely. He says he wants to put forth what energy he has left to doing other things, so he stopped signing.
Which is funny.
Eating soup. He wants to take all of his energy.
He's another one that works hard not to write.
Well, and if you watch, Joe mentioned Dreams with Sharp Teeth. It's a documentary about him. Robin Williams is in it. Neil Gaiman is in it. Octavia Butler. It's got tons of people in it. If you're into science fiction and fantasy, but they talk about he is a book called about his life and A Lit Fuse. A Lit Fuse is the biography. He had talked for years about writing an autobiography. He backed down. He did, however, give somebody the permission to write the true autobiography or the true biography of him. And for the first time ever, he said, "You tell the truth." And so this individual interviewed him, but then went back and talked to people that he went to high school with, that he did all of this stuff with.
I'd like to hear some of his ex-wives' stories, because he's been married, 5 times?
Yes, Susan, his current wife, and they've been married since the 90s.
5 times a charm.
If you watch the documentary, he talks about, and she's sitting there, they're having dinner, I think Neil Gaiman's there too, and he talks about how they got in a fight once, and he locked her out of the house naked while there were tour buses going by and all of that stuff, and he said that she's the only one I've ever had that can take that. So he is... I'm trying to think. There's another collection of his writings. Harlan Ellison's Watching is about his films, The Glass Teat and the Other Glass Teat. And then there's another collection of his essays just on life. One of my favorite books, and what I will say about him is, even in his even in his fiction, he normally does an introduction that has a lot of nonfiction in it. One of my all-time favorite pieces by him, speaking of Hunter S. Thompson and his love of Nixon, and by that I mean the lack thereof, in his book Approaching Oblivion, which is actually HarlanEllisonBooks.com, says it's a book that everybody forgets. It's probably my favorite collection by him, and it's probably the first time I was in middle school when I read it. And it's the first time that an introduction actually just made me go, holy crap. crap. Because the introduction to that, it was written... it was originally... He sold the concept of approaching oblivion, and he was going to just basically recycle some stories. And the beginning of in the introduction, he talks about, he goes, but that was 4 years ago, post-Nixon time. And he started writing a lot after Kent State, because Kent State made him extremely upset. I'd mentioned this before we started filming. Hunter S. Thompson and Harlan Ellison...
They denied his admission?
Are not... never worked together. A lot of people, when Hunter S. Thompson died, a lot of people reached out to Harlan Ellison going, well, did you ever... But they ran in the same circle. Hunter S. Thompson's first publication was in Revolver for Gentlemen, which was a competitor to Playboy.
Did they ever meet?
Harlan Ellison, actually, and I can't find the exact quote, but said he never met him, but they quoted each other some. Because Harlan Ellison recently quoted Hunter S. Thompson, but he said...
That'd be like crossing the stream with two jackasses.
I was going to say, and that's what he said. He was like, I've never met Harlan. We ran in similar circles because Harlan was an editor for Revolver. Revolver was the first one to buy Hunter S. Thompson's articles in 1961. And he said, we never ran together. He said, we never ran into each other. He said, I admire a lot of what Hunter S. Thompson said. I do not think we would have got along well as individuals. And I would argue that that's probably...
Literally a lovely tea party, wouldn't it?
Oh,
would you show up for
and
that?
the other thing...
And throw Harry Dean in there?
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing that I will say, and it's a story that
Machetes and AK-47s.
The story that we'll never get, because Harlan Ellison said he's going to take it to his grave, but you can find old clippings about it. There was something that happened between Harlan Ellison and Frank Sinatra at a club. Harlan Ellison showed up in boots, which I guess were alligator hide or something, and Sinatra commented sarcastically on them. And if you know anything about Harlan Ellison, the truth of he's quick to anger, very much so, which goes back to some of the stories Joe and
he's
I...
always trying to prove himself. Don't you think?
Even though he's
very
the
much
most
a short man
award-winning author,
even
living
to this day,
author
he's trying
to this
to prove
day.
himself and try to...
It probably, and we've talked about this before, probably if Harlan Ellison was in school today, he'd be medicated. They would have to. But him and Sinatra evidently fought. But the lady that was covering it for the newspaper actually ended it and said both gentlemen agreed that this needs to go no further. And so nobody knows the full story. And he's been asked that 1,000 times and he refuses to talk about it. But watch Dreams with Sharp Teeth, read some of his nonfiction. Like I said, his analysis of movies, and I know we're talking about nonfiction and we seem to circle back to movies.
I can't imagine why.
But the analysis that...
it's a mystery.
That gets done by Harlan Ellison, I love it because it does...
Smothered in what the fuck?
Well, it jumps...
Smothered? Not smothered.
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 We's in Kentucky, sir.
Where nobody gets famous.
It's,
The Colonel!
Where at least 4 people laughed at Vanilla Ice's Mark Twain.
Oh, anyway, Harlan Ellison...
Cassius Clay left here, didn't do shit.
His mama called him Cassius. I'm going to call him Cassius.
It was Clay. I'm going to call him Clay.
Anyway.
Abraham Lincoln.
Harlan Ellison, read
to go to Illinois.
Read his fiction, but seek out his nonfiction too. And once again, if you're interested in...
They call Chicago a poor man's Louisville down there, they do.
If you're interested in the history of science fiction, he also worked with... He was himself a fan. So he has stories on L. Ron Hubbard. He has stories on Ray Bradbury. He also actually... I mentioned last time he discovered, quote unquote, helped discover, she had the talent, Octavia Butler. But there's stories of him actually funding people who were trying to break into writing and break into movies and stuff like that, where he literally would loan them money because that's what people did.
I think we're running long on time.
And he discovered the magic land of Fraggle Rock.
I'm sorry. Anyway, no, Harlan Ellison is quoted by Stephen King. He's quoted by a lot of people. If you read Dance Macabre, there's a section about Harlan there. He does write fiction, but his nonfiction and his commentary about media, about what that means, about Nixon, about all that stuff, is pretty compelling stuff.
I just want to add one thing to his Harlan. I will give James crap, and he can wax on for a while, but Harlan is a fascinating guy. Mm-hmm. I know we're talking about nonfiction. If you think you should go out and read, I need to
I have no mouth and I'm a scream.
Actually, you know what? No, screw it. Repent.
Repent Harlequin, cried the TikTok man.
TikTok man. Really go out and read it. It's probably one of the best science fiction short stories of all time. Just go out and check that out. And if you see us at these cons, and if you actually watch the show and you're into this, and you can come up and talk about this episode to either James or I, we will tell you our Harlan Ellison story. We have a couple of them.
It's a good one.
We have spent a weekend with him in Madison, Wisconsin.
His last con.
Supposedly. And
he did one more signing at a Star Trek convention.
And James dragged me to it, and I had a blast. So
yeah.
And we both have good stories and took some abuse. One was physical, one was verbal.
And well worth it both ways.
Yeah.
Because if you do, like I said, if you've never seen it, even if you don't know who Harlan Ellison is, if you just want to see a man that...
But you have to do it in person. You
Yeah.
have to ask us in person, and you have to bring up this episode, and then we'll tell you the story.
Yeah.
Just to prove that you are watching.
If you're more of a movie person...
Sorry.
If you're more of a movie person, do see the documentary Dreams with Sharp Teeth, because it's him hanging out with Robin Williams, Neil Gaiman, and all that stuff. And
that stuff.
The movie actually begins with, "Is it true that you sent a dead gopher to an editor?" And he goes, "Absolutely." "Did you drive a dynamite truck?" "Yeah, the union workers wouldn't do it, so I did it." "Did you shove a fan down an elevator?" "No, that one's actually a lie." He did punch a producer in a meeting. He's a fascinating, passionate, and
he's batshit nuts, but he's a good writer.
He is Hunter S. Thompson of fiction, I guess, but no, they never.
Not really, because
they never.
Hunter,
he wrote fiction too.
Well,
no, it's not even that. It's just Hunter always partaked in substances, and Harlan is a teetotaler. Yeah. So anyway, are we done?
I was gonna say, as far as other.
It's okay, button.
No, as we wrap up books. I mean, there's tons of other books that we could have talked about, fiction and
I'm sure we'll
non-fiction.
come back and do it again.
I was saying, we'll... Chad just wants to talk
Chad's not coming back because Chad can't read.
Chad just wants to talk about his Garbage Pail Kids sticker collection, but...
They are cards that just happen to be stickers.
We probably could do a whole episode on 80s trade card and sticker card and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Cards... that just happen to be stickers.
But no,
they are pieces of art.
Let's end this. The audience have already tuned out.
I would say, no, well, all I wanted to say was that I pick up books. I pick up probably at least one or two new books.
You also pick up prostitutes, but you don't tell everybody.
He picks up sticks.
No, I don't pick up
never
sticks.
picks up
sticks.
Tell you what he won't ever pick up. Check.
Oh!
I would if you bought me books.
That's my F word. Sorry, Haley.
I was going to say, no, I buy books every week, and so I have a real love of books. So this is the
None
episode
of his children, though.
Do.
They go wanting.
Well, if they were more entertaining like a book.
Oh, God, get us out of this episode.
Said the audience.
Do the business.
All right.
Business.
So, over in the left-hand corner, subscribe if you're watching us YouTube. If you're on iTunes,
right-hand corner.
Right.
If you're in the left-hand corner, you're not doing a damn thing other than clicking in James's crotch.
If you can't see a subscribe button and hate us that much, also on iTunes and SoundCloud, we need you to subscribe to all three. Please do that quickly. Do so quickly without remorse. It's a short story I wrote once.
Was it published in a book?
Oh, God.
Guess we won't be talking about it in an episode, then will we?
I don't think I ever said it off. Anyway.
Tune in next week when we talk about Julia Childs and wonderful other TV shows.
We could do cooking shows.
That's been a Bonehead.
Joke last
Except I've
week.
never seen a cooking show.
You've never seen a cooking show?
I mean, I've not enough to where I could talk about one for 40 minutes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Roll credits.
Ooh, cookbooks will be next week's episode.
It's a cookbook. It's a cookbook.
How to serve man.
How to serve mans.
We're done.
Serve mans.
Hallelujah.
Big
It's
sweaty
raining
mans.
mans.
Big sweaty mans.
Hallelujah.